Dead, dying, died. It's going to happen to all of us. Death is not a dirty word. As a hospice nurse, I cringe when people use euphemisms. I know it might seem harsh to say the actual words that describe something sad and scary and that none of us really want to think about, let alone talk about. One time I was working at a hospice care center and the doctor told the family of our elderly patient that she had gone to heaven. And they just looked at her kind of dumbfounded because they weren't particularly religious. So she repeated herself. She said, "She's gone to heaven." And I guess finally their blank stares must have sunk in and she told them that she had died. And then they understood what she was talking about. Before the advances in medical care that can keep us alive almost forever, people accepted that death was a part of life. It usually happened in their homes. In 1923, the average life expectancy for a woman was 58 and a half years old. I am 60, almost 61. I would most likely be dead already if I lived back then. But fast forward to now, and the life expectancy of a woman is 81. So people seem to be disillusioned into thinking that we can somehow postpone this inevitable part of our life by refusing to acknowledge it. I'm not particularly excited about the prospect of dying someday, but I know that it's unavoidable, and by accepting that, I can move past thinking about dying and focus on more important things like living. Death is not a dirty word, but we've created all kinds of these euphemisms as if we don't speak the actual words, it somehow won't happen. Sure, words like passed away, passed on, gone to heaven, or celestial discharge are maybe like kinder, softer, gentler words, but it doesn't change the outcome of what has happened. They're still dead at the end of the day. Healthcare professionals especially need to have straightforward conversations with people when somebody is dying. People are highly emotional and anxious when they're in that situation, and we really have to be very clear about what is happening. Telling somebody that their person has died or is dying can be done very compassionately. We don't just walk up to somebody and say, "Hey, your husband just kicked the bucket." When I first became a hospice nurse, I was working in a hospice care center with a very seasoned hospice nurse, my mentor, this amazing 6-foot-tall, blonde, beautiful guru of all things hospice. She was just amazing. And our patient was an Asian man, and his daughter was there in the room, and she spoke English as a second language. So she had comprehension of English, but her first language was not English. He started to go through the signs of actively dying. As her dad started the process of actively dying, she got really upset and worried and was crying and saying, "What is happening? What is happening?" She didn't know. And my nurse mentor walked over to her and took her hands and bent over and looked into her eyes and said, "He's dying." And she walked the daughter over to our patient and she put her hand in his, and she just relaxed, like she was just all of a sudden so calm, and she sat with him and he took his last breath and he died. And she was able to have that experience with him because the nurse had been so honest about what was going on. She didn't sugarcoat it. She just flat out told her he's dying and took her to be with him. It was the most compassionate thing I think I've ever seen as a hospice nurse. Being able to say the D word can communicate an important message to a grieving person, that you're not afraid to get deep with them. When you can say to somebody, "I heard your husband died," it lets them know that you are able to get raw and real and have really hard conversations if that's what they need. Versus when you say something like, "I heard your husband passed away," it almost feels like you're kind of brushing it off, like you just want to kind of get it out there and then move on from it. If your person dies and you're uncomfortable telling people they died and you want to say they've passed on or whatever, that's your choice. But I will say avoidance of talking about what really happened can delay the grieving process. Despite some people thinking that we can get over the death of someone and move on, grief never really goes away. It lasts forever. We just learn how to live with it. We will always miss our person. We will always grieve that loss. But over time, we do adjust to that. We do learn to live with it. And in order for us to move past the initial shock and trauma that actual grief from a death can cause, we have to be willing to acknowledge the reality of it. And that can start by saying what it is. They died. They're dead. Using euphemisms is just a way to avoid talking about death. And when we do that, it can impact our living negatively, not only through hindering the grieving process, but by robbing us of an opportunity to make decisions about healthcare, how we want to die, where we want to die, and who we want by our side as we're dying.